What if what you eat and how you think could both be shaping your fertility? I am so excited you guys are here. If you are new to the Nutrition Awareness Podcast, my name is Kate Richardson and I am a registered dietitian here in Orlando. And we have a very special guest joining us on the podcast today to talk all about the mental and emotional side of our reproductive health. Today, I am joined by Carrie Ann Brown, and she is a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in reproductive and maternal health. Carrie Ann, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Kate. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad you're here because fertility struggles are often treated as purely medical, right? But the food and mind-body connection isn't talked about enough. And so we're going to really explore that today with our own experience working with different patients and different clients in different contexts. But there's so much overlap between how we eat and how we feel in our reproductive health. So I wanted to first start by introducing you to the audience by you telling us what you do exactly. Who do you work with and how do you help?
So, specifically for what I do, I work with clients and helping them navigate the emotional weight of their reproductive journey. Oftentimes, that's inclusive of navigating, trying to conceive, getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and having a positive postpartum experience. So, really just walking them through taking care of their mental health throughout their reproductive journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking before this that you and I are both moms. So you have two boys. I have a boy and another boy on the way. I'm currently pregnant. And so we've been, our timelines are different. And I've recently been out of the postpartum bubble, then reintroduced to the conceiving and being pregnant bubble. And the emotions that come along with this, nobody could have prepared me for how, I don't want to say heavy fertility can feel, but just the weight of motherhood and everything that comes before and after. I mean, you're changed from the inside out. And you can tell people about it. Maybe I heard it before I got pregnant the first time, but I didn't really fully understand until I went through it.
Yeah. Knowing about it, hearing about it, and living it, very different things.
I was curious when you first contacted me because we're both in the Orlando area. You contacted me about, how we could help each other and help our patients. I said, okay, I want you to come on the podcast and I want to talk about the patterns and the struggles that you often see in your clientele. And so one of the things that I was curious about are the most common emotional patterns. I don't want to say the word hangups, but maybe struggles that you see in your clients, specifically when they are trying to conceive.
Mhm. Gosh, there really are so many. So you're right when you talked about the all the weight and the stressors and things like that. So it's not just like a medical process of like, appointments and things like that. There is this underlying emotional, psychological layer. One that doesn't really get a lot of attention is the grief that doesn't get named when you're having fertility struggles. Um, with every, negative pregnancy test and failed cycle, there's just like so many layers of grief that doesn't get named. And from the outside, it can look like a medical process. Inside, it's really a grief experience, grief in it's an identity crisis. Like I thought I was going to be able to just decide I want to get pregnant and get pregnant and that would be it. And now there's challenges that maybe you hadn't anticipated. It's also a relationship stress test. There's just so many aspects of that come up that people hadn't anticipated. So that's one piece of it. I would say there's the identity erosion. Like if you saw yourself as someone that was maybe healthy, no issues, and all of a sudden you're having issues, it kind of changes what you thought to be true about yourself. I would also say that when you have been trying to conceive for months, sometimes even years, that journey can become all consuming. And so sometimes people experience a loss of like identity, like they forget who they are outside of their fertility journey. So like the identity erosion is a very, very common experience that I see people walk through. In addition to that, I would add I would say like magical thinking that comes up for people. If I do all the right things, if I eat all the right things, I move my body the right way, um, that it's going to work. This is going to happen for me. And then when it doesn't, there's a lot of self-blame that comes up. What did I do wrong here? What did I miss? What did I not do enough of? So the self-blame that happens is a very, very common experience, and a lot of questioning that comes up. And all of that stuff, it needs space to be processed, not just bypassed.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay, so you just named so many things that maybe I've gotten a glimpse of in my
Mhm.
experience because what usually happens when someone who's trying to conceive or is currently pregnant, or maybe they've had losses, when they come and see a dietitian, they're doing a lot of the things that they're embodying a lot of what you just described. I get a glimpse of the grief, and I want to come back to that. I see a lot of the controlling piece come up that's eroding their self-image or
Mhm.
self-identity. And that's what happens. A lot of the women come in and they're like, if I just get my nutrition perfect, on top of all the other appointments that they're going to, right? Not just seeing mental health therapists, but they're going to acupuncture, they might be going to fertility treatments. They're doing all of these things trying to gain control, which gives you a sense of empowerment. And I think that comes with food in general. A lot of us use food as a form to control things. And while some women come in and they do have a lot of work to do on their nutrition because they are skipping meals, they're relying on fast food, ultra processed foods, things that really just don't help our body in general. Sometimes they control things so much and it becomes all consuming that they're actually adding fuel to the fire. And I know we're going to talk about that. You know, as you were speaking about the grief piece, and the relationship stress and all that thing, I was just curious, before you had kids or while you were pregnant and in your own fertility journey, did you experience those things? Is that what inspired you to really help other women on this journey?
It absolutely did. Yeah, my path into parenthood was not as straightforward as I had hoped for, expected, anticipated. So I definitely had, a difficult journey into parenthood, which included having like a very, very premature birth at 6 months, a stillbirth. Like it went nothing like I thought it was going to go. So grief was very much a real part of my experience into parenthood.
Was that the first time you had experienced grief?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's what's surprising because, many of us are fortunate enough when we are in our 20s or 30s or even maybe early 40s when we're trying to conceive. We hadn't experienced a lot of grief. Maybe we still had our parents and siblings around. Maybe we lost, pets or older relatives. You don't know. Everyone's story is different, but you might not be familiar with grief. And then what I have found, specifically after giving birth, that this grief is new because I loved this little person so much that the love was associated with grief. That was my experience. It was a little different. I was like, wow, like now I love this person so much. I feel so much connection to this little person. Oh my God, what if I lose him? And that was what I went through, was more of like this postpartum anxiety that I really named as feeling grief for the first time of something I hadn't even, hopefully never will, experience. And so I didn't realize that grief can happen after. I understand conceptually how it could happen during if you experience losses or your timeline doesn't go exactly as planned. But wow, it just now I just carry grief with me. And being pregnant now, I'm about almost 20 weeks pregnant, right? Like, of course, the anxiety and the grief still follows me of what if, what if, what if. And so it's not straightforward. You had mentioned relationship stress. What do you see often happen if maybe a woman's been trying to conceive for longer than she anticipated? What kind of relationship stress comes up? Because I can share how that can impact how she eats.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the relationship piece, it's really, partners can grieve differently and cope differently with their grief. So what looks like emotional distance from one partner, might look like obsessive, focus from another partner. So there's like a real disconnect there for a lot of couples, and it's coming at a time when they're needing each other the most, so it can put a strain on the relationship. And the longer that a couple is going through this for, the harder, it is for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking about that because, whether somebody's going through a fertility journey or not, when there's two people who are going through different things in life, living together, sharing meals, sharing food, that can really impact someone. I think one of the obvious things is the stress eating, right? So maybe one person who's trying to control and eat perfectly and tick every box, the other person might be like, F it. I don't care. I'm just going to eat whatever I want. And maybe that's the male partner. And then the female partner is like, hey, why are you eating all this? We're trying to keep your sperm as healthy as possible so we can have the most successful outcome. And I can see how that can cause some tension. And I've definitely seen that with my own patients cause some tension. And then on the flip side, I see people work really well together too. Oftentimes both partners are really supportive of the other one. They're like, hey, babe, if you want to eat this way, sure, I'll eat how you want to eat if it means that we're supporting your fertility goals. One thing I thought about too, because we were talking about this a little bit on the phone, is how oftentimes, at least what I see, are more of the controlling, perfectionistic types that maybe lose their selves in the whole process of trying to look perfectly. And how this restriction of foods to try to be perfect and this obsession can really turn into an unhealthy cycle. Um, do you ever see that with other areas of people's life where they start to become so rigid or scared or fearful about how they're showing up in their lives that anxiety and stress actually has a negative impact on their journey?
Definitely, definitely. I'll say also food rules are rarely about food,
Oh,
you
no.
know. It's usually an emotional or psychological layer driving the food choices. So how they feel about what they eat, story they're telling themselves about what they're putting in their bodies. It's usually about control, fear, a desperate need to feel like you're doing something, anything that might work. So the cruel irony, though, is that the rigidity itself becomes a source of chronic stress. And we know the impact that chronic stress can have on our bodies as a whole, just for our general health, but specifically as it relates to our reproductive health and trying to conceive.
Let me explain to you how I explain it to clients, and then you tell me if you would change anything differently, that stress experience. So the way I explain it is our reproductive system is secondary, right, to our body, who's thinking about our survival. It's not focused on keeping our reproductive system functioning if our basic needs aren't being met because our body prioritizes the things that actually keep us alive. So if our ovaries and reproductive hormones aren't functioning optimally, but our heart's beating and our lungs are pumping and we're still functioning, that's what your body is going to prioritize. So if your body doesn't feel safe or nourished or rested enough, it's going to steal that energy from your reproductive system and it won't be able to conceive optimally, right? So if we are not safe enough to host a human life, our body knows that. And so we have to make sure that we are not just taking care of ourselves mentally, but physically as well, which means getting enough rest, getting enough nutrition, consistently giving our body the message that it's safe. And one way we do that with food is by eating consistently full balanced meals, eating to the point of satisfaction, eating foods that are nutrient dense, not necessarily perfect. And that's just one way that we can tell our bodies, like, hey, you have the energy, you have the building blocks to support hosting a human life. Because anyone who's been pregnant knows that you just lose a lot of energy in that beginning stage. You don't have a lot of energy because your body is requiring a ton of energy to build a human placenta and human body and blood and bones. And so that's how I frame it. Is there anything you would poke holes in or change or reframe?
No, that I love that you brought that up because that's exactly what I explain to clients. I find that it's helpful for them to understand how the body works, right? So it's not necessarily about like what they're failing to do, but just like how the system is structured, like we're wired for survival. So yes, it's going to prioritize anything that is needed for survival. And when there's chronic stress and just especially from which comes from being on a long fertility journey, for example, it's going to prioritize survival over what's needed for reproductive health. So that's yeah. When and also when every food choice carries the weight of your future family, eating becomes a source of anxiety rather than just care for your body. So the anxiety is a psychological stressor, physiological stressor.
And so this is your area of expertise because you tell someone who's anxious about what she's eating, right? So let's say she's anxious about what she's eating. Maybe she absorbs this information, but then her brain goes to, well, my doctor says that I'm technically obese, and to improve my fertility chances, I need to lose X amount of weight. Or, I've read online, I heard from this podcast, this functional medicine doctor said that I should be not eating this, and this, and I should only eat clean foods, no seed oils, no sugar. And so when you tell someone like that, don't be anxious, how does that land for her? Like, does she feel frustrated? I just in transparency, I do have, a little anxiety, but I wouldn't say I've come a long way since the food anxiety. So if I was in this journey and someone was saying, "Hey, don't be anxious, just relax around food," I don't know how I would take that. How do you work with clients who are feeling that way? If they're feeling anxious about anything related to their trying to conceive journey?
Mhm. So it's hard, right? Like it's hard to just say stop feeling anxious. Like that's never helped anyone. So it's getting under the meaning that they are prescribing to the choices that they're making. So it's not about the food choice itself, it's what they're telling themselves about the choices that they're making and what they believe that means about them. So like I said, if every choice of what's on the plate is tied to this desired future, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of weight. And so it's separating the meaning from the thing. Food is just food. It's really, I mean, you're the nutritionist here. Like you can tell me if this is right or wrong, but like food is neutral, right? Like we give it these like, well, this is bad and this is good and this is right and this is wrong. So neutralizing food is just food and separating like the meaning that they're giving to the food that they're eating.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a dietitian, I grapple with that sometimes. It's true.
Mhm.
And I take that differently with everyone that I work with. I look at where she's starting and adjust from there. I like to see food as not good or bad because it's not helpful. And I think also, while there is a neutral element, we can't deny that there are some foods that provide our body with nutrients, and there are some foods that are simply there for pleasure, fun, enjoyment, and they don't really, you know, give us any nutrients. So I challenge my clients, especially the ones who like to have control, the ones that like to feel like they're doing something, to frame food as nourishment, right? So there are foods that nourish us, they nourish our bodies, and then there are foods that nourish our soul. And sometimes, like I was just talking with a client today, not about fertility, but she had made chicken noodle soup every day for lunch. By day three, she was so sick of this chicken noodle soup. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's fine. You've got it. Is it not like exciting you? Does it not make you happy? Is there no like crunch, texture, fat, something to make it just nourishing to your soul, that yum factor? And so that's what we went through is how to make this nourish her soul because what she was doing was just going in the pantry and munching on whatever she could find instead of the chicken noodle soup because she was so sick of it. So really saying, well, how do we nourish your body with nourishing foods, whatever that means? And part of that is saying, hey, we have to eat enough throughout the day because if we are under eating and under fueling and we are not getting enough nourishing foods, then our body doesn't get that safety feeling and that can impact our blood sugar, our stress hormones, our nervous system. Even under eating can negatively impact our sleep. There are studies that show if we under eat complex carbohydrates or carbohydrates in general throughout the day, we can have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So we have to make sure we're eating enough nourishing foods consistently throughout the day. And if that means sometimes we have a brownie or every night we have a brownie after dinner because that just makes us happy and it makes us feel calm and it gives us this like transition between work and relaxation. Like I have a piece of chocolate every night after dinner because it's like a signal to my brain that like, okay, we're chilling, we're done, right? And it's nice and I like it. And that's what we do. We figure out a nourishing plan for them so that their body not only gets the basic nutrients that we need to support reproductivity, because that's real, but also fuels them spiritually, emotionally as well.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that that helps to kind of take away the shame around the food choices that they're making. So like shame and fear around food can keep the nervous system in this like threat state. And like we talked about, how that leads to the deprioritization of reproductive health and the prioritization of the hormones that just the survival state that the body needs to stay in. So yeah, I like that.
You mentioned the self-blame and the self-image that a lot of women or the stories they start to tell themselves about themselves. So I'm thinking of situations where maybe a woman's been trying to conceive 6 months to 12 months, depending on her age, maybe that she gets diagnosed with infertility. Maybe she gets that diagnosis from a doctor who just kind of like says, hey, technically you're infertile now. What are some of the stories that you see these women or men tell themselves? What comes up a lot?
Wow, so many stories that I've seen. So one would be um, this, I'm not enough. If I can't do this, I'm not enough. My body is failing me. That's a really common story and belief that, women have. Like, my body's supposed to do this thing. It's supposed to be natural. It's not supposed to be this hard, and it's not doing it. So they internalize that as like feeling broken. I'm broken. My body's broken. Like, these are stories that really um, run deep. And the longer you tell yourself a story, it really starts to feel like a true story, you
And I think
know?
it shows you the stories you believe. As woo-woo as that sounds, the more we subconsciously or consciously tell ourselves the truth, the more the world proves that to us. Have you ever had a client or patient tell you her story about herself that really like was positive? Like even if she was going through the weeds of infertility or loss or stillbirth, miscarriage, did she ever tell you a story that you were like, wow, if everyone told herself that story, maybe you'd be out of a job. I don't know, right? Like it would be so empowering.
Mhm. I cannot think of one in this moment. It's very rare that I have someone, with like, this is for my good. Like, this is, like, I can't really think of a story in this moment where it was they're having a difficult time and they have a positive story during that time. Maybe afterwards, they can look back and say, I can see, yes, it was hard. And also like, these were some learnings that I gained from my journey. But while they're in the midst of it, they're really not necessarily having positive. It's hard, right? It's hard to do that.
I can imagine. I was hoping, I was like, maybe there's something, but I can see hindsight, right? It's like, oh, God's timing. If I hadn't gone through this experience, I wouldn't have the life or baby or whoever I have now. And so hindsight is truly 2020. And I wanted to ask you something else here. Maybe we're going to kind of talk more about the food piece a little bit. Do you ever see clients who have history of disordered eating, anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia? For listeners who don't know what orthorexia is, it's an obsession with clean eating, pure eating. But basically, we'll just call it disordered eating under that umbrella. Do you see that come up a lot with women who have fertility struggles, that history?
In my practice, I personally haven't, but I know that that's a thing. And it's great that, there are people like you that, are out there that can help them with that because, we've talked about how problematic that is and the impact that that can have on not just their fertility journey, but just their overall health. But I can definitely see how that can happen, where it could lead to that obsessiveness of having the perfect fertility diet could lead to disordered eating.
I definitely recommend any woman who's struggling with trying to conceive, or maybe she's starting on a fertility journey and just kind of wants to feel as confident and nourished as possible going in. If she's ever struggled with disordered eating, to meet with a dietitian. What we do at our practice is we order functional tests. So I can test your ferritin and iron stores, B12 stores, all of these different nutrients that we want to make sure are optimized and in a healthy place to help support fetal development and, of course, mental well-being. But another huge thing that I see comes up is a lot of times when women have been on diets before, whether it was for weight loss or whatever it was a diagnosed eating disorder, oftentimes they tend to have an aversion to a nutrient group. Oftentimes that's either complex carbs or dietary fat. So like for me, when I don't know if I ever told you this, Carrie Ann, but I've talked about it on the podcast before. When I was in my 20s, I lost my period for 14 months. And it was because of restrictive dieting and overtraining. And I had a diet very, very low in dietary fats. So a lot of times dietary fats are restricted when women are following like a bodybuilder type protocol. That's what I was doing. Lifting weights, trying to feel lean. They're not eating a lot of these fats. Those fats are crucial for helping synthesize hormones in our body and protecting organs like our reproductive organs, and of course, supporting our brain health. And our brain kind of governs all of our hormone function. So, a diet too low in dietary fats can negatively impact our body's ability to support life. And then also, carbohydrates are a huge one that a lot of women are scared of. Carbohydrates give our body a lot of energy. Specifically, if we go for complex carbohydrates that are full of micronutrients like sweet potatoes and oats and beans, and they just have all these amazing nutrients, then our body has the building blocks and energy it needs to help support a healthy, functioning reproductive system. So, if you're not sure, if you feel really scared about eating those foods, if you're skipping meals or obsessively counting carbs and fats, and you want to start or are in the midst of a trying to conceive journey, meeting with a dietitian or just auditing your own diet with a nutrient tracker can be helpful to make sure you're meeting your minimum needs. So if you're not meeting those minimum needs, even if you do get pregnant, you may not feel great. You may feel really crappy, and you're probably going to feel crappy either way, but you want to optimize that as much as possible.
All right, let's be real. Most of you know how to eat healthy, right? You know that kale is good for you, that protein can make a huge difference, and that sleep can be the ultimate game changer in your health. Maybe the problem is putting all of this information that you know and that you hear about online into one cohesive plan that not only works with your busy lifestyle, but also for your unique body and for your unique goals. We know that here at Nutrition Awareness. We are a team of 2 registered dietitians who have a combined 20 years of experience working in the one on one space, where we help individuals create a personalized nutrition plan to help them get from where they are now to where they want to be using food. So, no matter your story, no matter your struggle, we can help you. Whether you are trying to lose weight with or without a weight loss medication, if you're trying to manage your PCOS, optimize your fertility, build muscle tissue, navigate perimenopause, we're going to spend some time really getting to know you and your struggles and work with you to create a plan that you will actually stick to. And then we give you relentless accountability and support. No matter if you want daily support, weekly, or monthly, we've got a plan that matches what you need. We meet you where you are, and it's very customizable. So if you are done with the guesswork, if you are done of trying something just to see it fizzle out weeks or months later, it's time that you work with a dietitian, and we invite you to come check us out. You can visit our website, www.nutritionawareness.com, to learn more about who we serve. And we keep all of our pricing very transparent, and we have different options that work for every single budget. Of course, we do invite you to contact us if you have questions. All of our contact information is on our website, nutritionawareness.com, and in the show notes below. We want to help you finally find the nutrition plan that is going to get you to where you want to be. And we hope that you decide to work with a dietitian, and we hope even more that you consider us. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Back to the episode.
Moving away from the food piece, I wanted to ask you, as the mental health expert, what are your top recommendations for someone who needs emotional support while she's trying to conceive?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the grief piece because it's just so important. Just naming what you're going through as grief, right? Trying to conceive when it's not happening easily is a grief experience. There's layers of grief that's tied into the experience, and treating it that way instead of like a logistical problem to solve. I need to do this and go, have this appointment and track this and eat that, and just giving yourself permission to actually feel it as you're going through it um, is really, really helpful. And I think just finding spaces, at least one space where you don't have to perform and be okay, right? Like you don't have to minimize, you don't have to pretend like everything's fine, you don't have to put on a brave face. So whether that's a therapist or a support group or just one trusted family or friend who gets it, because isolation just makes everything harder. So just finding that safe space for yourself and work on separating what you can control from what you can't. Like there's so much in this process that is out of your control. It's a very out of control, experience. And so identifying the things that you can actually control, like the things that are helpful and useful, just because you're doing all the things doesn't mean that they're all actually helpful. So really identifying, what you can control, what's helpful, what's most useful, and focusing on that is another helpful way to, just really navigate this. And going back to the nervous system, I'm going to keep going back to that. We can't eliminate all stress. Stress is a normal part of life. So it's not about eliminating the stress, it's just about creating safety for yourself and in your body. So building in, regular moments of actual rest and safety. So your body, signals that you're okay right now, not just waiting until you get to your happy ending, to be okay, but like you're okay right now. Your body needs that signal of safety.
How many times do you tell women to quit their jobs? Because I was thinking, I'm like, I've definitely joked about it and said things before with like an undertone of like, no, but really, maybe. And the reason is because I'm thinking of the women who I see, all of them have full-time jobs. Some of them are on the very high stress level. Some of them are kind of like middle stress. But I don't have a lot of the women who are really struggling that come and see me who have like this like chill, lackadaisical life. And that's probably because when they're hyper controlling food, that's just kind of going to go into their personality trope. Like I'm the same way of like, oh, like I just want to do all of the things. I want to do more, do more, do more on top of a very full plate. And so sometimes I'm kind of like, hey, if we can't quit our jobs because our that would create more stress financially or, break down identities. Obviously, there's so much that goes into that. Like, let's do less. Can we do less? Can we say no to more things that aren't really helping you? Can we not sign up to be the president of the board? Can we decline volunteering, even if that means letting someone down? Can we just like give ourselves a break? Like, that's advice that I'm giving a lot. I'd say most of the time they understand. It's like met with like, oh yeah, I can. As far as execution, it's a different story. I'm just curious, is that advice that you share a lot or kind of like where like a conclusion that you find that patients find themselves, reach themselves?
It absolutely is, right? Like just because you can doesn't mean that you should, right? So saying yes to everything and doing all the things, it leads to burnout, So we kind of like look at, okay, what's all that you're carrying? What are all the commitments that you have? And sort of, do you have to be doing this? Do you need to say yes to this? Is this serving you? How is it serving you? What would it mean if you didn't do this? What would you create space and room in your life for instead?
You know what
So
I think
helping
it does?
them,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you know what that makes me think of? It's almost like training for when you are a mom. Because when you become a mom and you got this little baby, all of a sudden your priorities change and you literally cannot do all the things you did before you got pregnant. And so that's just kind of what came to mind is like, oh, okay, like what does it mean not doing all of these things? What if we see it as you training for what hopefully will manifest into motherhood?
yeah, we definitely talk about that. Like this is practice. We get to practice this now so that when your life changes, because you've had this practice, it's easier to make those adjustments.
That's a really beautiful way to see it. It's almost like, hey, maybe, and this is for my spiritual folks out there who think like maybe this is just kind of like what I need to do so that I can hold motherhood because it is all consuming. And if work and social life and obligations are all consuming, maybe we have to practice letting some of those go before we enter a new paradigm. Do you see a lot of high achieving women, just to kind of put a label on it, perfectionist, high achievers, struggle with trying to conceive?
Definitely, I do. That's probably a majority of the people that I see. Yeah, I see a lot of that.
Yeah, and this is kind of go on a little ta tangent there, and this is kind of more of what I hear being spoke about in the zeitgeist, right? Is the boss babes too close to the sun? Have you seen that? Where people talk about, oh my gosh, like I climbed this corporate ladder and now I worked my butt off and now I'm the breadwinner and I don't know what to do outside of work. I don't know who I am outside of work. My nervous system is frazzled. I just keep throwing dollars at things, trying to fix all of these problems with the root cause is really just stress and maybe, like you said, some identity confusion. Do you,
Yeah.
because I was going to say, I mean, that's just kind of who I attract naturally as a dietitian. I'll see either that type of person or the person who is living off Cheetos and Diet Coke, and they're like, I need to change. You know, usually that's way more fixable.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
interesting that you see that as well.
I do. I do.
How do we
I
how
think too, it's like, sorry, I was going to say the stress piece. I know we're talking about that a lot. And I think it's really important for people to understand like stress does not cause fertility issues, right? There's not a causation here. We don't have any evidence of that, but we do know that it can impact fertility. And so I think it's important that we make that distinction of impact versus cause, because I see, people feeling like, oh, it's not happening because I'm too stressed and I need to calm down and, feeling like they're the cause of the issues that they're having. And, infertility it's a medical diagnosis. It's not a moral failure. It's not, you're not broken, right? It's a medical issue. So just the distinction, I think is really important to point out.
Oh, totally. Because stress itself's not bad. We have natural, you probably hear cortisol a lot, comes up a lot. I get clients that say, so cortisol, tell me like should I get my cortisol checked? Never had so many people ask me if they should get their cortisol checked in the past year than I have in my 8 years as a dietitian. And the
Wow.
answer is, well, we all naturally have cortisol. It's a very motivating hormone. It gets us up and moving. It keeps us driven. Yes, if you do have cortisol imbalance, it doesn't hurt to get that checked out. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get your cortisol checked for anyone listening, by the way. The best practice is to order something like a Dutch test where they test your saliva 4 times a day. We have natural spikes and declines in cortisol, and so one time of day doesn't necessarily capture the whole picture. I don't think most people really even need a cortisol test to know if they're too stressed or not. I think what's best is to really, like you said, focus on, well, what deserves stress? Like, what are we stressing out that actually deserves stress? Like, our job that pays the bills, probably, or maybe like an aging parent that needs our support, that probably calls for our stress. But like, what doesn't? Is it making your 6 a.m. Orange Theory class? Is that stressing you out? Is that really necessary? Is that really helping you? When you get home and you've got to rush around and you've got to, you know, get showered in 5 minutes to get to work, like, is that stress necessary? Can we do
Yeah.
something else that's actually restorative and helpful for your nervous system and body? And I think that's fun to comb through. Just
Yeah, it
prioritize
is.
stress.
Yeah. And as you were talking about that, it made me think about like with my work with clients, I do a lot of narrative stuff. And so it's like there's the thing that we're doing, right? The experience that we're having, the thing itself, and then there's a story that we tell ourselves about the thing. So with that 6 a.m. Orange Theory class, it's like, what's a story that you're telling yourself about? Like, what does it mean if you don't go to that class? What are you telling yourself, or what do you believe that that says about you? So there's a story, there's always a story. And I really like to help clients unpack.
Ooh, okay. So can you practice on me?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, so let me think about this. So I have this story that I tell myself that I have to weight train during pregnancy because the first time around it helped me get back to my normal healthy weight in a timeline I felt good about. So now that I'm pregnant again, I'm feeling scared and pressure. Got to do that again. Make sure that I stay fit and healthy as much as possible because it's fear driven.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, what do you believe that it would mean if you didn't do that?
If I didn't weight train,
Yeah, if you didn't weight train during this pregnancy, what would that say about you?
I'm afraid that it would share that I am weak and not motivated and setting myself up for a rougher postpartum recovery.
Hmm. Yeah, and what would that mean for you?
A shift in identity. I'm afraid
Mm,
having 2 kids means that I'm going to have less time to take care of myself, and that scares me.
yeah, yeah. So, by doing the weight training during this pregnancy and keeping up with that, it's helping you to prepare for success, right? Set yourself up for success in the postpartum training. And that belief comes from a prior experience that you had with your first pregnancy. So it's been proven, right? You've experienced that. So if you don't do the same thing that you did before, your fear is that you're going to have a very different outcome, but not just a different outcome, but negative outcome.
Yes. Yes. And if
Yeah.
I miss a strength training workout, 'cause my 3 times a week, or I don't walk on those off days, I start to feel guilty.
Mm, okay. So it's the guilt is probably what maybe what you're avoiding. Yes, there's a desired outcome, but then there's a guilt that comes up that probably doesn't feel good, and you want to avoid feeling that guilt. So you force yourself to make it to the class. Okay. Okay. So there's a story there about what it means about maybe you as a parent. If you don't do these things this way, it's very like, structured sort of way, that in the postpartum period, you're going to have a difficult time. And that has meaning for you in terms of the mother that you're hoping to be
Yeah.
during that period of time.
I would say not just being the mother that I am, but maybe just the separation of being Kate versus mom. Like I'm afraid that with all the changes that come along with postpartum, physical, mental, emotional, that if I don't stay on top of my fitness part of me, I'm going to lose that entirely.
Mm. Yeah.
My fear.
Well, I think you know this to be very true about yourself, that fitness is really important to you. So it sounds like it's unlikely that it's something that you would just step away from entirely, even becoming a mom of two.
So the reality, like trying to see the reality of, hey, that's probably unlikely. And then what
Yeah,
you're telling people is to actually, like what I liked what you just did with me is encourage me to look at the past and what's true and what's not. And so you're like, what's true
exactly.
is that you've done it before, you'll do it again.
Yeah,
So what that helps me is like when that guilt comes up and that need to be like, oh my God, I didn't get my 10,000 steps in, like just chill. Like I'll be
yeah,
able to do it again. I did it once.
yeah.
I've done it before. I can do it again.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
encouraging people to like see the reality. That's what I need
Yes.
like reality checks
It
sometimes.
is, right? Because like, there's what we think and then there's actually what is true,
Yeah.
and so helping them to kind of make the separation of like, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I believe, but what's actually true here?
So what if you had a client tell you this story? Because I've had this come up before and it left me almost speechless because it's like, wow, that she feels like less of a woman if she has trouble trying to conceive or holding a pregnancy.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of women feel that way. Yeah. So what I always say to that is that your worth is more than just your reproductive story, right? Like being able to conceive isn't your only purpose and function. It's not your whole identity. It's not your whole purpose in life. Um, so you're separating people's worth from their ability to conceive and carry a baby and have a family.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the problem is when the worth is like that's the worth. Like that is if that's, you know, all that I am is tied to that. First of all, that's a lot of pressure to put, right, on something that you don't have control over. And so helping them separate their worth from that, so like if it, God forbid it never happens, like what does that mean for you? Like your entire worth can't be tied up into that,
Right. Yeah.
so helping them to find worth outside of that is really important.
It's the story piece you told me, where it's like, okay, the story you've been telling yourself for 30, 40 years is that you're going to be a mom. And maybe that's still true, but maybe there's something else that there's another story that needs to be another chapter that needs to be written for you to turn to just in case.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite pieces of work that I do is like identify. I'm always looking for the story, right? And helping them identify the story. Because oftentimes the story isn't conscious, right? Like they don't recognize it. And so I bring that to the forefront. And we do some, we rewrite the narrative, we restructure the narrative. This is a story that you believed. And now let's rewrite that. There's another story here.
And that's just not woo-woo stuff. I mean, I've heard so many different articles and research. It's not just like The Secret, the manifestation book that everyone's heard of. It's really rooted in
Oh,
research that your beliefs about yourself and the world shape your reality. And that can sound a little woo-woo, especially I think for people who are so grounded in reality and numbers, like with foods, like how many grams of this and how many calories and is this inflammatory? Like all that stuff sometimes can feel a little bit out there, but it's not that far from reach. As somebody who really did used to hyper control everything in her life. Like that kind of stuff does give you peace and it's very helpful, the writing the story piece.
Yeah,
Um,
it's neuroscience. Neuroscience is what it is. Like it's not woo, like you said.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. It's not. Anyone who doubts that, do you have any like books or resources that you usually turn them to kind of help them better understand?
Ooh, that's a good question. I am such a book reader, and of course, in this moment, I can't. Okay, let me think.
I've got a guy if you can't think of one.
Hmm.
While you think, if anyone wants, there's a guy named Nir Eyal. Nir Eyal. Okay, so he's a behavioral design expert. I think he also happens to be an investor and an author. But he's this guy that's really rooted in like research and science and evidence-based, blah, blah, blah. And he talks a lot about the science of beliefs. So his name is spelled Nir space Eyal. And I think he was pretty down to earth. Obviously, you can go and find like Joe Dispenza and things get a little crazy out there, but I enjoy that stuff for other people who do.
Yeah.
It's rewriting the story about who you are, what you mean, what your fertility means. And so what I'm getting from this conversation, because you and I, we work with the same types of women and the same people on a fertility journey, just in different lenses where you're starting in the brain and I'm taking that and moving that into the body. And so really separating what's reality and what's a story you're telling yourself. Like if you're telling yourself the story that sugar's inflammatory and it's the reason why you can't get pregnant, then that doesn't serve you because that's not actually the reality, right? It might be something, if you're so hyper focused on this story that isn't true or serving you, you might be missing the reality that actually could serve you, which is, are you getting enough total nourishment, consistent nourishment, sleep, rest, stress management? And I don't say all that stuff to overwhelm people because sometimes you can go through the list of like all the things that you could work on to help improve your reproductivity and your relationships, your sleep, and all that can feel very overwhelming. We take it bite by bite just to help people think like, hey, maybe you've been focusing on these little minute details that aren't changing the reality for you and changing your health status.
Yeah.
Could I share one
Yeah.
other thing that happens nutritionally that I see? Is that a lot of women will come in and they are on ChatGPT or AI or they're listening to somebody on a podcast who recommends a ton of supplements, like a ton of supplements. And so I'm like, well, what's up? I always ask everyone what vitamins, supplements, medications are you on? And when the supplement list gets over about six, unless they're prescribed by like a trusted medical professional who is not invested in the supplement company, I'm just going to say that they're not getting a kickback, their name's not on the bottle. I really like to sift through all the supplements people are taking because there are some that can help, like CoQ10, very simple, harmless, helpful for egg quality. And then there are some where I'm like, hey, we don't even know what's in this. It's not very regulated, and we don't know how that's impacting your body. We don't need to be taking 12 supplements before you've had breakfast. Let's just look at your food and kind of take that down a little bit. And that often provides a lot of relief for women because they're like, yeah, I've just kind of been taking supplements on and on for so long that I don't even know why I'm taking any of these. Or we'll go through their supplements and I'll find that, they're prenatal and then some other kind of like random fertility supplement is giving them tons of folate that they don't even need, some of it methylated, some of it not, and so they might be actually getting way more than they need, and so that is something I would really encourage the people who like to do more to improve their fertility to look at is maybe we can cut back on some supplements, narrow it down to 3 to 5 that really can benefit you, and then focus more on that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like that. When somebody comes to you and they're like doing everything right, they're doing all the things nutritionally, right? They're still struggling. What do you tell them?
First, I make sure they're feeling that they're being really honest with me. So this is one. A lot of us are perfectionists and they come and see their dietitian or their therapist on day one, and they come in with a story, right, about themselves or what they want me to believe. So I have to like be really like girl to girl with them, to be honest, and like break down walls and be like, hey, like you told me this diet that you're eating, it sounds great on paper. Like, are you ever snacking between meals? Do you ever feel out of control? Does the weekend get a little wild? Do you ever like eat your really healthy, clean lunch and then just kind of like graze all day? And then first of all, we just got to make sure that there aren't any kind of like gaps coming up. Because what I see a lot of times is they might be eating really clean all day, but then at night or weekends, it's just kind of a hot mess in terms of how and what they're eating. And then that fuels that guilt, that fuels that shame, that negative self-image that just causes more restriction. So, to be honest, do I see a lot of people in the fertility journey who are doing everything right nutritionally? No. But if I do, then I would say, well, let's look at your labs. Did we get all of your labs checked? Are your iron stores up? Is there any kind of gap? Are we missing any nutrient groups? Okay, no, that's when we start to look at their life, right? And so obviously I'm not a mental health therapist, but we'll start looking into their exercise. And so this is what really stands out. Sometimes even when they aren't doing everything right nutritionally, this is a huge issue. They are doing way, way too much activity compared to their rest and input, as in like what they're eating. The ratio is just off. I fell into this trap for a long time. So they might be doing a boot camp 3 to 5 times a week. They have this really high step goal. They're just constantly trying to be active. Often it's rooted in fear about weight changes, or maybe it's just kind of beliefs or stories that they told themselves about what they need to do. And so if they are way, way too active and not resting and eating enough, then that can cause an imbalance and cause that safety issue, right? Where the body's like, oh no, like Kate's burning too much energy. She doesn't have the capacity to host a human life right now. And then we might even look at her hormone patterns. So usually she's going to be off birth control at this point, at least for some time. We'll look at her hormones and see if there's any kind of clues we can see there. If she's missing periods, if she's not totally aware of when she's ovulating, or she's not getting clear signs from her body that she's ovulating, either from tests or from like the discharge that comes when we're ovulating or from her temperatures, then we'll start to look and see, hey, is there some kind of equilibrium issue in your rest and activity relationship?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Is there like a food related belief that you wish women would just let go of when they're trying to conceive?
That there is no like evil culprit food that's causing your infertility. Like it's not the gluten. I promise you, it's probably not dairy and it's probably not sugar and it's not even like the bag of Doritos you really wanted. It's really the context of what you eat. I like to think of people if they could put all of the foods you eat in a week, right? We could just visually see Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If we could just see your total diet, if some of that is not healthy food, if it's gluten, dairy, whatever, that's not what's causing the issue. I promise. Like you having bread, if you're worried about gluten and inflammation, or seed oils, there are plenty of people who eat tons of that stuff, probably more than their dietitian would recommend, who aren't experiencing fertility issues and maybe have a similar background as you. So I would say there's no one bad food. We need to look at the diet as a whole, and maybe we'll find that, hey, yeah, there's room to cut back on those things, but let's replace it with something else nourishing. Because if you're relying on these processed foods or foods that maybe you've told yourself are bad, evil, and we see that, hey, rooted in reality, you're right, we don't want to be eating as many of these foods, we have to think, well, we need to eat something more to nourish you so that those foods are less appealing because you're eating them for a reason. Oftentimes, when we really are craving like chips, cookies, crackers, whatever it is, it's because we're underfueled or we're really stressed or our blood sugar's imbalanced. So we have to front load our diet with nutritious stuff first.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a nutrition standpoint, like what's the difference between eating for fertility and eating in a way that actually hurts your chances? Like how do you help clients find the line?
Oh, well, I'm eating for fertility versus eating in a way that hurts your chances. I'm going to go back to that nourishment piece. So, nourishment can embody a lot of things. First of all, enough. Are you eating enough? Are you nourishing enough? And then we can break that down in enough of what? Are you eating enough complex carbs? Are you eating enough fiber to help move things out of your gut? Because fiber binds to excess hormones, can move that out of our gut, keep you regular, keep your digestion functioning, right? Are you eating enough iron? Are you eating enough B12? Are you eating enough dietary fat? Are you eating enough protein, which helps you feel anchored and full and prevent cravings, right? Are we eating enough? Somebody who's eating in a way that would negatively impact their chances is there's just a huge gap somewhere. They're usually not nourishing enough. And if it's not from food, it's going to be from rest because that's, I think, nourishment too, nourishment for the soul or spiritual soul or emotional soul, social soul, right? Something needs to be nourished. And if it's not food, it's probably the thing that feels the hardest. Do you ever feel like that's true? Like for some people, controlling the food and getting all that right is actually pretty easy. But the thing that's really hard for them to do, like being vulnerable, opening up to people, reaching out to friends, having a social connection, that hard piece is actually probably what they need most.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the challenge for that is they're carrying so much shame, and it's hard to connect, like have real connection when there's shame in the way, So healing that shame and helping, again, disconnecting the worth from the fertility stuff, like all of that work is really important because then we can remove the shame from the experience, right? Like this is something that's happening to you, not because of you.
Yeah. Wow, that to me is such a like that is a powerful reframe. It is, hey, this isn't because of you. This is just what's happening around you to you. So how do you take care of yourself while you navigate what's happening to you? Not like you're a victim or anything. I'm not going to do that whole story either, but hey, like this is an experience you're in and it's not because of you. There's
Yeah.
a reason. I could talk to you about this forever because
Yeah.
psychology behind food and fertility and just who we are as people, as women, especially. I mean, women already experience so much freaking pressure all the time. The pressure to get pregnant on your first try and have this like easy pregnancy and bounce back and have a healthy, happy baby. Like that is so much pressure. And so the more pressure we add to ourselves, the harder it just gets to navigate. And I wanted to ask you one more question before we wrap up today. If you could tell each of us women who are feeling anxious about our either our trying to conceive journey or our future in motherhood, right? We're just like feeling overwhelmed by the whole process, whether we've started or we plan on starting soon. What would that be? What would you tell us?
I would say don't let your anxiety convince you that your body is the enemy, that you're a bad person, that you're not enough, right? Like none of those things are true. You're doing the best that you can. And again, the experience that you're having, whatever it looks like, it's not because of you, right? Like it's happening to you, not because of you. And you're probably just needing some support in navigating the weight of all of that, and how to carry that and how to take care of your mental health as you journey through, the season that you're in. So whatever the your outcome looks like, it's you're so much more, than that. But yeah, just don't let your anxiety convince you. Anxiety is really convincing, and just because you think it doesn't make it true.
Maybe they need to stay off social media if they have
Yeah.
anxiety. Because I tell you what, as I'm in the other side of postpartum, motherhood social media as a whole nother beast. And so I can imagine the fertility side, the trying to conceive side, if that's what your algorithm is showing you, is going to make that anxiety voice loud,
Loud.
mean, and just ugh. So maybe a social media
Yeah. Not
detox.
all not all information is useful or helpful, right? There's a lot of information out there, and really just paying attention to as you're consuming this information, how's it making you feel?
Yeah.
Really pay attention to that because that is information, vital information for you. And we have the power to do something about that, right? Like we can choose what we um expose ourselves to and the information that we're consuming. And so really just paying attention to how it's making you feel. What does it feel like in your body as you are,
Yeah.
consuming and being exposed to the things. There's a lot of information out there. And with that comes a lot of unlearning. The things that we were conditioned and socialized to believe and we're learning aren't, you touched on a few of them earlier, of like, oh, you should be able to just like, you want to get pregnant and you get pregnant. Like it should be easy. You're like all of these, myths that we have to really unlearn.
Well, that's such beautiful advice. Not the easiest advice, which is why if someone wants to rewrite their story, unlearn some of the beliefs that have kept them feeling anxious, stuck, or just unhappy with where they are, how can they find you, Carrie Ann, if they want to work with you, if they want to work with, a mental health therapist who is an expert in fertility and maternal health? how do they find you?
Really easy, actually. You can just go to my website, healingwithwisdom.com. So that's healingwithwisdom.com. I also have a free guide. It's called Five Ways Stress Could Be Affecting Your Fertility and What to Do About It. So you can find that in the link in my bio on Instagram, which is at HWW Counseling. So those are two ways that we can connect. Inviting anyone, if any of this resonates with you, to reach out and schedule a complimentary consultation to discuss your goals and explore whether working together feels like a good fit.
Beautiful. Well, Carrie Ann, I can't thank you enough for being here today. I could talk to you forever. So, thank you for being here, and everyone who's listened this far, thank you. We'll see you on the next episode.